Good morning. I want to thank the organizers for letting me speak on this issue to all of you. It's good to see all of you here. This is an issue I care a lot about. I'm very passionate. I work with Our Monarchs. We're a group of concerned citizens who really care about this issue. We knew there was a problem and we really wanted to do something about it. Our organization's main objective is to get beneficial plants in the ground. One of our main activities is sending out seed packets. We send about 50,000 of these a month to individuals, schools, churches, different groups in the community. We really like to engage the public, get people in a hands-on activity. This is a nice conservation issue because it is something that each person can do something about. You can plant a seed and see it grow and see monarchs come or whichever butterflies you like. In that vein, we created a program called Corridors for Pollinators, and the goal of that is to work with folks like you all with right-of-ways, large areas that are perhaps not taken advantage of fully, perhaps with no real business need, though they're owned by businesses. Our first project was with the Nebraska Public Power District. I have a representative from them here today, Ben Beller. Good to see you here. We did a pilot project with them 3 years ago, a 50-acre site. It was a former quarry, needed some reconstruction, some restoration. It's been very successful. Well, we see a lot of monarchs, a lot of other pollinators when we're there. We just got an agreement with the Omaha Public Power District. I live in Nebraska, obviously. And they want to convert essentially all their holdings to native vegetation, which is exciting for us. And they do have a lot of property as well. What I'm talking about mostly today is a partnership we have with TransCanada for the last few years. TransCanada's program is called the Pollinator Pathway Initiative. And this is a corporate program. They've been involved in pollinator projects for several years now, and we just wanted to move that along and do something in the field. Of course, with that, they have a huge footprint, and site selection is a big issue, as I'm sure many of you are aware of. We settled finally after looking at several sites on central Michigan. The A&R pipeline goes through there. You can see on the map on the right is Michigan. There's three huge, very large company properties in this area. These were oil wells back in the 1940s, and hundreds of well pads there. What they found, they ran out of oil, and they found they could store natural gas in these fields, and so they continued to use those. There's 3 properties in 3 counties. It's many thousands of acres, over 10,000 that we worked with for this particular pilot project. They're all being managed now for pollinators. So a lot of it, of course, being in central Michigan, it's dry sand prairie historically. It's a lot of broadleaf forest. So out of that, over 11,000 acres, a lot of it is woods and wetlands. So we're working with the open areas. One of the main reasons we chose this site, first off, its size, which means you're going to have a pretty big impact, but also the environmental specialist works out of the main office where we work there, was really instrumental in doing this. He's there every day. He knows what the maintenance protocols are. It was very easy to work with him. Just real quickly, because you've all done habitat probably, but just to go over our activities. When we got started, so last spring at this site, we did a herbicide application, beat back the cool season grasses, free up some space. Last June, we planted 8,000 plugs, forbs, and grasses at pollinator islands at these well pads. I'll go into that in the next slide. Then in the fall, we interseeded essentially all the open areas, not quite all the open areas, but all the right-of-ways and a lot of these other meadow areas with 70 species grass and forb mix. We got local students to do the monitoring, doing transects and then floral associations, which pollinators are visiting which plants with what frequency, which there's a dearth of information on that, I know. And then upcoming now for when the growing season comes again, we'll be doing spot herbicide treatment and then manual woody plant removal. So these well pads, we actually got this idea from Chip Taylor from Monarch Watch, who was working with tribes on similarly very large properties, which are obviously not economically feasible to plant. So we chose these well pads. So these hundreds of well pads where these drills were have regulatory requirements. They all need a 75-foot cleared radius. They don't use all that. You can imagine Michigan in the winter, a guy needs to take a valve reading. He basically needs a truck lane to go pull his truck in there and take a reading off a valve and get going to the next one. So these were ideal sites for us. These range from a quarter acre to an acre, and there are hundreds of them, like I say. What you see in the top photo, since we started talking about this some 6 months before we actually did any work, the staff who does the maintenance, they do a lot of this stuff internally since it's a large facility and they have an office there. They started to notice milkweed, for example. So they would go back to this environmental specialist, hey, we found milkweed over here, maybe we shouldn't mow. So the first thing they did was stop mowing everything. And you got a lot of beneficial plants that came up. through that. Out of those 8,000 plugs, we did have some milkweed that we didn't even plant here, and we gave to another conservation organization because there was so much milkweed in the first place. Then we used staff. It was a staff work day, and also volunteers from other organizations, local conservation organizations came and helped us with that. The important thing, which I know we're talking about today and tomorrow, is building support for your program. Community Investment, who is our contact, got to all the directors, the heads of the departments, and got buy-in from the senior management. This is a good way to let everybody know. We've found that when it does come from the top down, as we've heard some other people say, it really seems to help lubricate everyone else, that they feel they won't get in trouble with their boss. They're free to do what they think they need to do to create habitat. So that's been crucially important, and there are always some challenges with that we have to go back to, but it was good to start that way. Environment Week is celebrated in Canada every year in June. We went and gave a presentation in Calgary to all the staff, which included by webinar the folks in Houston as well. This is also good. So again, it's something for the staff to be proud of, that their company's supporting this, but also to let them know what we're doing. And a lot of them want to participate in it as well. As we've also heard a lot today, collaboration was critical for this site. The city itself, the closest city is Big Rapids, about 15 miles from the main site where we were working there in Mecosta County. They donated a recently annexed park space adjacent to another park as pollinator habitat, some 20 acres that they gave to the program between us and Pheasants Forever. The mayor signed the National Wildlife Federation's Monarch Pledge, so they've taken a lot of steps with this lead that we had. Pheasants Forever, they're always ahead of us. They're in every community where we go. They've helped to buy the seeds, to donate volunteers and equipment, some ATVs for seeding, things like that. Ferris State was the close university. They have some environmental clubs, also the biology department, so the students to do monitoring, and they also came out and helped with plugs. We did some community outreach. This seems very important. You want everybody in the community to know what you're doing, and there is quite a lot of support for this issue, as many of you probably find. This meeting that you see here was standing room only, very well attended, and we let all the organizations come in from the area. Everyone had a booth. Everybody got a chance to speak, and that was is vital as well. So you get a lot of volunteers that way, plus nice community awareness, which education is a big part of this issue. And we also did school workshops. We went to all the elementary schools and the middle school. We got to give some presentations to them also in the biology class in the junior high. And then again, engaging the public, getting people to do something hands-on. We were able to have a field day at that park that the city had donated, where we planted another 2,000 plugs with 500 kids. And that's nice for those kids. They'll get to go back and see that establish over the years and see what happens. Local media outreach is also key. I know we do a lot of things on social media or the website, but local media really in a lot of projects, you want the attention locally. The whole idea of community investment is that you're investing where your employees live and go to school in this case. We got a lot of really good local press out of this, which is still continuing. Then the company did a landowner mailing. Most of these companies who have right-of-ways, they're in a lot of contact with their neighbors, their landowners. So 265,000 seed packets went out with one of their regular mailings, along with a little insert explaining the project and inviting them to participate. So we actually added another 687 private acres to this project by putting out that mailing with some interest. We paid for some of those, and a lot of these owners took it on themselves to do that. Financing, that's perhaps a really big issue here, as you probably know. Our first thing we like to focus on is the internal land management and maintenance budgets. There's a collective sigh perhaps, but we see that in businesses, it's not necessarily a question of if to spend money or not, but how to spend the money. So all the companies we've worked with do have budgets for this. And so a lot of times it's a question of what your priorities are, what you're trying to get out of what you're spending, so value. And a lot of times by tweaking some of these budgets, we've been able to provide some money for this kind of habitat. Seeds and plants are by far our biggest program expenditure, so we look for grants, private donations to pay for those. And then as you've heard from everyone today, teamwork. So having everybody chip in a little bit that can really seems to make this lighter for all parties, and it makes it much more easier to get other people involved with that. Then our next steps with TransCanada. So we'd like to do a company-wide field training in IVM. So for all those people who are out in the field to understand what it is we're trying to do, what steps they can take, how they can manage to promote this kind of habitat. We'd like to have an internal policy for managing IVM or managing right-of-ways as integrated vegetation management across the whole right-of-way footprint, which is very large again. And then we'd like to see other groups like ours be able to do this. So we find that while there might be some interest, a lot of people are not educated on a lot of these aspects, and it is kind of daunting, especially if you're in the field and you would like your company to do this. So it does seem to take some hand-holding, and we can't be everywhere at the same time, so we'd like to see other groups doing this kind of work. Our program goals in general are the creation of restored and enhanced pollinator habitat throughout the flyway. We'd like to see cooperative IVM policy on all right-of-ways, as we're proposing here at this conference this week. And then we'd really like to avoid a listing of the monarch, which I also think will be a great tragedy for all of us, because this is an issue that we fairly easily identified, much more easy than a lot of other conservation issues. We know what needs to be done. We have the means to do something, and if it does get listed, I think that represents a real failure on a lot of our parts. So that's our main goal. Thank you.